For centuries, debate between science and faith has been deadlocked over a single assumption: that a miracle requires God to break established laws of physics. This friction is less about physics and more about a culturally inherited, highly flawed definition of what a miracle actually is. In his systematic theology, Wayne Grudem argues that God does not intervene in reality from the outside. You cannot break into a room you already inhabit. God is actively sustaining the movement of every particle in the universe at all times. Reframing reality from a wound-up, ticking machine to a continuously spoken thought sustained in the mind of a creator changes the very concept of the supernatural. Think of reality as a continuous, flowing data stream of divine providence rather than a set of mechanical gears. The biblical terminology for miracles maps onto this data metaphor. Look at the Hebrew and Greek terms for sign, oath, and semeion. In physics, a sign functions like a mathematical vector. A vector possesses magnitude and direction. Similarly, a biblical sign is an event engineered to point our attention toward God's underlying activity. Further down the text, we see the terms for wonder, mopheth and teras, representing a massive delta in calculus. A wonder is a dramatic change in state, an extreme outlier deployed to disrupt our baseline assumptions about the universe. Down in footnote 4, the text identifies the human reaction, the Greek verb salmazo. If a sign is the divine input variable introduced into the system, human awe is the mandatory output calculation. The writer of Hebrews states that God continually carries along all things by his word. Providence operates like a smooth, continuous baseline rhythm on a track. Grudem defines a miracle simply as a less common kind of God's activity. This is the same divine power used in everyday providence, but operating at a different frequency, a sudden extreme shift like a massive drum fill that seamlessly returns to the baseline rhythm. This reframing exposes the flaws in 3 common myths. First, the critique of the phrase, a direct intervention of God. This definition assumes a deistic model, where God only occasionally steps into a world that usually runs on its own. The next section dismantles the idea of God working without means. When Jesus multiplied the loaves, he used the existing physical matter of 5 loaves and 2 fish. When he made wine, he started with water. Finally, Grudem addresses the concept of breaking natural laws. This phrase implies that physical laws possess an inherent independent power that God must somehow bypass. Discarding the idea of an absent clockmaker heals the false divide between natural science and divine action. Instead, we are observing the exact same active divine authority, just operating at completely different, highly intense frequencies within the universe. If miracles are merely a different frequency of God's activity, we must rethink the assumption that working them automatically proves apostleship. In 2 Corinthians, Paul defends his ministry using this list of markers. He highlights his self-support, his refusal to take advantage of the church, and his willingness to endure suffering. The text explains that false apostles easily project charisma and confidence, but their lives are marked by pride and greed. Christlike endurance and a willingness to suffer for the benefit of others cannot be manufactured. When Paul eventually mentions signs and wonders, he is simply adding one secondary additional factor to the deeper moral marks of his character. The miracle is merely the wax seal pressed onto the outside of the envelope. The Christ-like character is the actual enduring letter held safely inside. Scripture shows that miracles were never the exclusive territory of the apostles. Men like Stephen and Philip and everyday Christians across Galatia performed them regularly. Power was radiating continuously outward through the entire network of the early church, rather than being isolated in a top-down hierarchy. These anomalies function as tactical flare strikes deployed on a dark, oppressive battlefield to illuminate enemy positions and push back spiritual darkness. Martin Luther's famous hymn captures this reality. The lyrics focus on an ancient foe armed with cruel hate, framing the Christian experience as an active conflict. Miracles are strategic deployments of divine power intended to conquer evil and secure territory. Believing God only exists in the miraculous leads us to assume he is absent from our ordinary lives. This false dichotomy makes faith logically impossible for the scientifically minded. forcing a choice between physics and a God who supposedly only breaks physics. This error shapes how we evaluate leadership today. We are constantly drawn toward platforms, sheer volume, and displays of power. Paul's defense of his authority flips this entirely. Although he could raise the dead, he used his pain, his physical weakness, and his patience to prove God was with him. Simulating charisma and manipulating a crowd is a simple task. Faking a gladly endured thorn in the flesh is impossible. The ultimate proof of God operating in your life is your Christlike endurance to patiently suffer for the good of others, rather than your ability to bend reality to your will. If God is already actively sustaining everything, does the word supernatural actually mean anything? Let us know in the comments. Second, do modern churches focus too much on chasing signs and wonders at the expense of developing patience and suffering? Finally, based on Grudem's definition, could a highly improbable but scientifically explainable event be classified as a true miracle? For rigorous, clear theology without the confusion, subscribe to Visualize Theology. We'll see you in the next one.